All right. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Exit Liquidity. This week we're on episode 76. We finally got the numbers right, so we'll actually be counting now, unlike we haven't been for the past year and a half. This week we have OnlyLarping from Karate. Thanks for joining us, man. Love the energy over there.
What's up, guys?
It's also great to have a video avatar on. It's been so long since we've done one of those, and I think people underestimate how like personable it is. Like when you're like 15 20 minutes in, you don't even realize that you are like speaking to an alien or a milady or whatever. It just feels like that's you. So I
It
love
is.
that. um Cool. Yeah, we can get right into it here. To start out, would love to hear a little bit about who we have on the show today. If you can give us a little bit on who you are, what you're working on, how you ended up to be where you are today, we'd love to hear that.
Sure. So, intro on myself first.
Yeah.
Cool. So, I myself have been in crypto going back a decade or so, building businesses. Put me in a really fortunate position to allow myself to invest in a bunch of friends' businesses. And one of the biggest things I did was back one of my best friends from school to build Karate Combat. So we built it together. From the ground up. And for the last few years, I've been running the Web3 effort at Karate Combat, um, building this crazy tokenized pro sports league.
Awesome. And I mean, that's a pretty long time frame. Could you give us some insight on kind of what were you doing in your initial time and just the general crypto space? What kind of cults were you in? What were you
Yeah,
into?
yeah, all over the place, really. Um, from the beginning, just buying crypto. There weren't that many of them back then. But quickly got really excited in different applications of the underlying technology, finding ways to use blockchain and distributed ledgers to improve the real world. Um, I think I got like even more invigorated during DeFi summer and everything that happened around then, um, and started really digging in. Uh-oh, I got a intruder. Hold on one sec.
Man, it would be so cool if we just
I
saw
had
like a little
a little
baby
baby
alien.
alien. Yeah, I've got three little toddlers, and two of them just burst into the room. But yeah, I got like obsessed with DeFi. Got pretty involved in a couple different DAOs, but also a little bit frustrated at the same time. Just sort of a realization that below like the fold on CoinGecko or whatever, most of the buyer base for tokens is really retail. But on the flip side, they're buying, into these like financial, like fintech products, really. And there's a little bit of a mismatch there because a lot of what kind of retail buyers, including myself, are looking to do is like have fun. And I think it's a little bit odds with the underlying products. And got really obsessed with like trying to find ways to make crypto a lot more fun. And out of that sprung the karate token, really, which is really built sort of on DeFi tools, but is designed to be as much fun as humanly possible.
Yeah, I think we'll get into like the way Web3 and the token is kind of like involved in such an in real life thing. I think that's one of the most interesting aspects. Um, I'd say the fun part about interviewing founders or team members of different protocols is like most of them are uh, involved in DeFi Summer or they're trading shitcoins on the side.
Yeah.
Do you have any moments where you might have been exit liquidity that kind of highlight
Oh,
your
sure.
journey in the space?
I mean, too many times, I'm sure. You're here for 10 years, and definitely not everything goes right. Um, I mean, of course, like my buddies and I have a Discord server. Um, we're always talking about like this time we're gonna sell the top. I mean, this has got to be the third time that's been. I mean, it's just I don't think it's ever happened.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's probably one of the hardest things to do in the space.
Impossible.
Yeah.
Impossible. Because at the top, it just feels like, you know, obviously it's up only and there's a new paradigm. Um, but, crypto's got this like really accentuated cyclical nature to it. Where it feels just so incredibly good because like there's all these traditional people pouring into the space, um, and it really pushes token values to crazy places, um, and it's just a little bit impossible to really get your head out of it, I think.
Yeah. Uh, so let's start with kind of like a high level overview on karate combat, maybe like a mission statement or what your guys' goal is.
Yeah, for sure. So Karate Combat, we built from the beginning to be a sports league for the next generation of fans. Younger people like yourselves watch sports really differently than older cohorts. Like they're watching on their phone. A lot of them are just watching highlights on social media. They're much more likely to gamble on sports. And we built the league for them, across every vector, starting on distribution. There's absolutely zero paywall for Karate Combat. So at the same time, the events are distributed live for free with great, linear TV partners around the world. We stream them for free on the internet, literally everywhere. Our own site, karate.com, but also UFC Fight Pass, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, you name it. Recently, we started teaming up with some of the biggest streamers in the world who broadcast it out on their own channels in their own languages. And that permissive sort of view on IP is really been a big driver of our growth, I think. Um, on the format itself, the rule set, so it's like called Karate Combat, but for a casual fight fan, it's like UFC without the wrestling. Um, uh, the biggest complaint from casual fight fans when they watch the UFC is the time on the ground. They don't understand jujitsu. They get bored watching two guys roll around on the mat. We take it out, but we also make the round shorter, and the scoring favors aggression, so you get tons of knockouts. Um, on the production side of things, our goal is to make every event look like a real life version of a unique level in a video game, like think Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter or Tekken. And we sort of do it one of two ways. Half to 2/3 of our events we'll have in like film studios, convention centers, stadiums, and beyond the audience. We stream this 3D VFX environment rendered live in Unreal Engine using really precise camera tracking. And then the rest of the events we have in these crazy real world locations. We were literally on the beach 2 months ago in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, like one of the most beautiful fight events probably ever. But either way, trying to make it look like a video game level. Um, and then lastly, on the Web3 side of things, um, as I mentioned, I've been in the space for a very long time, but we never did any crossover between Karate Combat and crypto. The league's been around for almost 7 years. But 2.5 years ago, we came up with this thesis, this idea, and the core reasoning behind it was, if you pull our demo, like almost half of them will say that they don't enjoy watching sports unless they have a bet on it. And so our dream was, imagine if we could get a little bit of financial upside to every one of our fans on every fight. If we could do that, we could get them like researching the fighters ahead of time, learning their names, their backgrounds, their styles, things that are critical to get someone to actually care about a sporting event. And then during it, if they have a little financial upside on it, they're like hyper engaged. And the idea was, if we can do this, perhaps we can shortcut this long process between awareness and like true super fandom. Super fandoms where like all the money is in sports. We have this very large awareness, like 6 million followers, hundreds of millions of views every month. But making that leap is not trivial. And so that's why we built the karate token and up on the gaming.
Yeah, and you coming off of last week, you guys had like a really huge event at Consensus that I
Yeah,
heard you went very well.
thank you.
Could you kind of give us some insight on like all the production, the craziness that happens there? And I feel like this last one in Austin had, I think I saw like Joe Rogan was there, Shane Gillis, like
Yeah,
normal people that
yeah.
aren't involved in crypto in like any way, shape, or form, just kind of just enjoying the venue.
Yeah, I mean they love fighting. So it's not, it's not a stretch for them to show up to a combat sports event. But they also love the pit. All of our fights take place in this sunken pit, which is incredibly unique within combat sports. And they love the rule set. Who doesn't love to watch a few hours of, you know, uh, guys mostly punching each other and kicking each other, like nonstop action for a few hours. And also the entire environment we set up, it feels very different from a normal pro sports event. It feels a little bit like an underground fight club, a little bit like a party. you know um, it's a little bit bizarre too. So like the whole whole thing is a great experience. I mean, I've had so many people walk out of these things and tell me that this was like one of the best pro sporting events they've ever been into in their lives. um, and so word definitely gets around fighters and celebrities that it's just like a really fun time.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely seems that way. And then can you like explain like from a viewer perspective how like the crypto and token component comes into play? Like if I've never heard of
Yeah,
karate
for
before
sure.
and I'm just now getting into it, like how does that affect my experience?
Yeah, for sure. So it's pretty wide ranging. The reason we built it all though was for this product, this like app, this sort of like game that we've built and branded Up Only Gaming. Um, the way it works is for 48 hours before each event, every single karate token holder can vote on which fighters they think are going to win. And when they vote on winning fighters, they earn a little bit more tokens, karate tokens, from a fixed karate prize pool. So they're not gambling, like they're not risking losing the tokens they have, but they do stand the chance to win 2, 3, 5% more tokens if they get their picks right. And the hope was like this is enough financial incentive to get them to do research and to get them to really care about the fighters, even if they hadn't even learned their names yet. Um, uh, and we've got a lot of people participating in that. We had over 90,000 people play this past week. Um, and if you're there, it probably doesn't affect your experience too much, except you have a little bit of kind of financial upside on the event. If you're watching at home, though, we like integrate it throughout the entire broadcast. Like every fight, they talk about the size of the prize pool and the percentage of tokens that were put on this fighter versus that fighter. We do bring a lot of our token holders out to the events and really integrate them into like a real VIP experience, coming to the ceremonial weigh-ins and the press conferences, meeting with celebrities, getting great seats. And we talk about that throughout the broadcast as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for in retrospect, the idea of gambling on like fighting events is probably like a key element of why anyone even kind of participates. There's so many aspects to even like gamble on as well, from like knockout to,
Sure.
and one thing that I find kind of interesting is you guys are using this like tradition. I don't want to call it like a traditional crypto mechanism, but sort
Yeah.
of like a DeFi
Yeah.
mechanism to kind of incentivize that. How have you guys found like explaining that to non-crypto users in the entire like onboarding experience? Does it feel like crypto? Are
Yeah.
like people like KYCing? What does that all look like?
Yeah, so it's a real crypto experience, but we made it as easily as humanly possible, which we did to like onboard regular sports fans. But I think the work that we put into the UX was just as important for crypto natives, because crypto natives are just people, right? And if you you have them jump through a bunch of hoops, like the participation is going to be so much lower. So I'm a huge believer that the future of consumer crypto is mobile. Um, we built ours with like a true non-custodial embedded wallet, um, but we did it through native iOS and Android apps primarily. We do have a web app that you can use with any compatible wallet, but almost everybody is using the iOS and Android apps that we launch. So if you download the app, you automatically get some free karate tokens dropped into your non-custodial embedded wallet. And then you get notifications that it's time to go and make your picks. And I think you need something that easy to really have a chance at onboarding 90,000 or 900,000 people. And that's what we went out to do. So the onboarding to the karate token and karate combat is very, very simple. I think the best way to explain it to users is really to get them in there and like playing it. We try to explain it throughout our live events. We hammer it home throughout the broadcast where we have a real captive audience. But I think the best way is to just like get people to download it and start to play around with it.
Yeah, and the token itself how is it related to the DAO mechanism and kind of ownership of the karate combat as a whole?
Yeah. So we did something extraordinarily radical. I think, nobody would have probably ever done it unless, the league was controlled and owned by people who have been in the space for a decade. Before we launched the token, my co-founder and I, we sold the entire league to an ownerless foundation. And we structured the foundation such that it can actually be governed by the token holders. So nobody owns Karate Combat anymore. There's no like, equity in some other entity that, is stripping out economics or anything like that, which I think is pretty unique even within crypto, to be honest. We really went all the way with it, burned the bridges. And it does simplify the story. I think if there was some kind of equity entity out there that really owned all the IP, it's more complicated about why the token might be interesting. But we can say to people honestly, look, nobody owns Karate Combat anymore, and it's controlled by the token holders. So if you want to have a say in the league, go get some tokens and participate. And we made it very easy to participate. Of course, we have the same governance forum as everybody else at gov.karate.com, but we run 99% of the people are participating in governance directly through the app. We've got a league governance tab. We've done about 10 governance proposals to date. We've got 5,000 to 7,000 people participating in each of them, and it's a great way. We've changed a bunch of the rules of the league. We've changed how Up Only Gaming works, and people are really involved in it.
And is there an ethos behind that reasoning, or was it purely for functionality when it comes to the decision to have
No,
a DAO and
there's
was the token
definitely
involved?
yeah. I mean, there's definitely a big ethos behind it. There is. I think and we did it at a time when it was actually very difficult to do. We did a $20 million token sale before the token launched, basically at the beginning of last year. And at the time, it was almost impossible to raise like institutional money in a pure token sale. Like everybody was just raising like equity plus token warrants. So it was like the thing to do. Of course, times change, and like that's not what's going on exactly right now. But we always thought it was like a little bit bullshit, like you're gonna, be selling institutional investors one thing, and then for the rest of time, you're just gonna be talking about this token, and you're gonna have like these different constituents with different interests. And so, yeah, we went all the way with it. And I think from a practical perspective, it simplifies things, and it improves on the marketing. But it wasn't easy.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. I think it's always been like a challenge getting that right in crypto. I think there's very few just teams in general out there who have such a strong focus and like effective, I guess, execution on having a genuinely fun product. I think that's something that's like really unique here, and it's obviously seen throughout all the branding, all the socials, everything. You go and you see, these events that people love that Cito was, literally just at yesterday, 2 days ago. Um, you said the league has been around for 7 years. What was it like in the earlier days? I'd imagine starting up a sports league like this requires like a lot of like networking early on and getting the right people together to, bring in top fighters, top talent, stuff like that. How is that? What does that look like in its early days?
Yeah, so my co-founder did that mostly, and it's obviously it's very difficult. I think starting a new sports league is one of the hardest things you can try to do. Um, Sports leagues, the big successful sports leagues that we all know and love have been around from, I don't know, 30 plus years with the UFC to 100 plus years with, like, when you're talking about MLB. And they have massive advantages, from distribution to, diehard fan bases, fans that grew up watching these teams with their dad when they were like a toddler. So competing against that is very difficult. You have to get the athletes to trust you. Um, you have to, uh, uh, build your own or sign distribution. Eventually you need to sign up sponsors. It's extraordinarily difficult. I wouldn't really wish it on anyone, to be honest. The nice thing is that the advantages do start to compound over time if you survive. It does get a lot easier, but it takes a while to get there.
Yeah, and that's one thing that might not be clicking in my head totally of like, how do you go from, because honestly, a DAO working inside the crypto world is like a
Yeah,
hard thing to accomplish.
for sure.
But a DAO that is working in the crypto world that also has significant output in a real large setting with thousands of people, I think is like super rare and super interesting. Could you
Yeah.
explain the process maybe in like a governance proposal that kind of actually affects something that people would see on the actual
Yeah,
streams?
for sure. I'll pull up. So we've got like a dashboard at like karate.com/dashboard with like all the metrics from the events and also like the historical governance proposals. So it looks like we've done like 8 or 9 governance proposals to date. I think most to all have at this point really been proposed by the team, although there's like been significant influence in like what's been proposed by the community. And typically like it starts as like honestly some sort of like social media post or something, like someone within the org decides that they want to change something that requires a vote, start talking to people about it in Discord or even Instagram or Twitter, and eventually, like, you know, people start to feel like there's enough support for it that something gets posted to the governance forum gov.karate.com, where it's debated amongst the community for probably a week or so. Then there's usually some sort of sentiment poll within the governance forum, and if it passes the quorum rules within the governance forum, it's moved to a token vote. To date, I think most of the governance proposals that have been put up have been to modify the actual rules of the sport, or to modify the rules of up on the gaming. Hasn't really got like too deep into like the actual inner workings of the league yet. Um, but for instance, like the last governance vote was a vote to modify um, the low kick rules. So since the inception, um, karate combat has outlawed kicks between the knee and the waist. I think there was a thesis early on that it would slow down the fights. But we got lots of pushback from the fans. We got pushback from fighters, and at some point, George St. Pierre like made a video actually asking us to change it, and we ended up pushing it to a token vote, and it passed by a wide margin. It looks like we had like 6,500 people participate in it.
Yeah, pretty impressive turnout here. I don't know if you guys can all see this. I just pulled up the dashboard page, which with all of the proposals. I love how you call them kick 1, kick 2.
Which, by the way, does not stand for anything. We couldn't think of a single like acronym that made any sense. So we're like, just fuck it. Let's just call it kick.
That's sick. Yeah, it's mostly like rule modifications, stuff
Yeah.
like that. It sounds like this one is like a bonus, a Kraken sponsored bonus.
Yes.
Pretty cool.
Yes, they did. They put a $10,000 bonus on the Influencer Fight Club Fight of the Night. and it was taken home by 2 female fighters that did a great job.
That's dope. How far could you see this going? Like what are like, in a couple years, how big could these rules be? Like could people be voting on fights specifically? Like could they be voting on entirely new rule sets? Like what's
Definitely.
what's
Yeah.
like a
So from a fight perspective, like there's definitely some logistical challenges there. It's actually really hard to get a fight booked, period, because you need both fighters to agree. You need them both to be available. You need it to make sense within the card. Huge logistical challenges around the whole thing. I think that eventually there's going to be fights that the token holders just demand to see, and they're going to push it through. I'm sure that that's going to happen, like no brainer. I think even earlier than that, though, it's very likely that like the fight ops group, essentially the supplier to the foundation that runs fighter operations, is like making a big matchup, maybe unclear about who should be fighting for the belt, and like proposes to the crowd like, hey, these are 3 guys that can um, challenge for the title. There's arguments for each of them, like who do the token holders want to see go up against XYZ. On the rule set thing, actually, that's sort of happening in a way. We've got 2 spin-off IPs. One is called our Pit Submission series, which is a competition grappling rule set that's really taken off. We've had 5 of them already. And then we also have our Influencer Fight Club, which has tremendous traction at a minimum within people who want to fight in it. The amount of people who are required, and the resumes of them, and the reach of them is pretty crazy. I mean, at this last event, Mario Nafal jumped on the stream and called out Rand Nooner to fight. It's just shocking how many people want to get in a pit and beat each other up. And so I can definitely see like these 2 spin-off IPs with a ton of traction eventually kind of like spinning out and launching their own up on the gaming tokens one day or something like that. We definitely need to have the token holders codify those rule sets at some point. They were launched as like pure experiments, and we got super lucky, and they both worked really well.
Yeah, I think so I went to the like to speak on like the fighting aspect itself. I went to the UFC event over the weekend,
Uh-huh.
and I mean I thought we had pretty good tickets,
Yeah.
and couldn't see anything beyond the cage. Like our necks were hurting. We're like staring at
Oh
the
yeah.
screen the whole time,
Yeah.
and whenever like grappling would happen. So the main card was Islam and Dustin Poirier,
Yeah.
and a lot of the guys on the card, I guess, were from the Islam camp,
Yeah.
and they're like some like really good grapplers, and they've like submit and beat a lot of people through these like crazy grappling techniques, but it's not fun to watch.
No.
It might be a little bit interesting to watch like on TV when all the angles are kind of given to you,
Yeah.
but when you're there, it's like it's the whole crowd is booing. Like the
Yeah.
whole stadium is just booing every time a he even dives at Dustin Poirier's legs.
Yeah.
So that was like that's an I think an interesting difference. I think you guys hit the nail on the head, kind of catering to an audience that wants to see that kind of like striking and stand up fighting because
Yeah.
even amongst UFC traditional fighters, it's like the most loved aspect of the sport.
Definitely. I mean, when you watch the UFC's highlight packages, like they're not really showing that many submission attempts, right? They're showing crazy knockouts and stuff. And I think when you think about the UFC, it started like the original kind of marketing hook. The idea was behind it like, let's put fighters from different disciplines into a cage and see which discipline is the best. That was like the entire hook to it, right? And it's sort of a settled question now. Grapplers, jiu-jitsu practitioners have like a real big advantage. And so, in a way, um, it makes sense. Like the rule set allows for people to like shoot takedowns and try and submit their opponent, and it's tough for like a pure striker to compete with that. So I think that there's an opportunity in the market for a different rule set that's really pure striking.
Yeah. What are most of the fighting styles for people in karate combat or fighters in karate combat? Or is
Yeah,
it
I mean
actually karate?
the largest one is, yeah, because we started with basically all karate fighters. There's an interesting story there too. Like there was never a professional karate organization really of any note, and the sort of like Olympic, not exactly Olympic, but sort of Olympic karate like organization sort of like prevented it from happening a bunch of ways. Like we're very anti-competitive about it. And there were some law changes and some court cases, and it opened up a window to go and sign all the best karate athletes of all time, really, which is how we started it. But over time, recruited tons of folks from kickboxing backgrounds, boxing backgrounds, taekwondo, Muay Thai, really all the striking arts.
Yeah, and those fighters, I think I heard that they get like a percentage of the pool if they win,
Yeah.
out of the karate token pool.
That's right. So on each event, there's a fixed karate prize pool. At the last event, it was 150 million karate, and 90% of that goes to the token holders that get at least one of their picks correct, and 10% of it goes to the fighters themselves. 9% to the winning fighters and 1% to the losing fighters. And in a big way, the fighters are actually incentivized to sort of like drum up hype on their own fights because each individual fight is like vote weighted. So if like there was a 150 million karate token prize pool and half of all the tokens were put on one fight, then half of the prize pool is going to go on that fight. And it doesn't make a difference to the token holders, right? But it does make a difference to the fighters because they're getting 10% of a bigger prize pool.
Yeah, I think because there's a lot of commentary on, I think, like Dana White and how much he's paying his UFC fighters, and I guess like this not only helps them earn in karate, but also kind of gives ownership to the better fighter, like ownership of the league and kind of the decision making.
Yeah, I mean, so sort of the idea behind Up on the Gaming is that over the like very long term, the league is controlled by the most active kind of fans, players, and the best fighters. And that'll take a very long time to get there, frankly, but that's like the end state.
Yeah, could you give the just a high level like tokenomics run through on the karate token?
Sure. So from a utility perspective, it's sort of threefold. Number one, the karate token governs karate combat. Number two, gives you entry into this game, and frankly, that's what I think like most people are fixated on at the moment. Is sort of like the no loss type of gambling game that we built called Up on the Gaming. And then lastly, because the league is owned by no one, really all the perks that traditionally flow to owners of sports properties, think like the pit side seats, the trips to the events, merchandise, access to after parties and weigh-ins, and time with the talent and fighters, all that stuff should flow to the token holders. But instead of just going to the biggest token holders, they're actually allocated based on where you are on the Up on the Gaming leaderboard. So to get access to all that stuff, you actually have to participate. And so that's sort of like the utility piece of it. Yeah.
And is there like uh, emissions on the token? Is there kind of any more distribution that's happening?
Yep. So it's 110 billion token total supply. It's about, I think, 25% unlocked so far. There was a really, really big unlock at the 1 year anniversary of our token launch, which was just back in May. So like the token sold off a lot ahead of that. The balance of the tokens unlock over the next couple of years. Um, we established, up only gaming requires rewards, and we put 3 years of rewards on the balance sheet of the foundation. After that standpoint, to like kind of continue the game as it is, as a no loss sort of sweepstakes, it would require additional tokens, but that would be up to the token holders to decide.
Okay. And then you mentioned the kind of reward systems for fans. How many fans kind of each fight were like flown out, met with, fighters or got these experiences?
I mean, that's a good question. The events are all over the world, and the token holders are all over the world. So it's, probably less than like, I don't know, 10 of them flew out to this event, but the reactions from them were like absolutely extraordinary. I mean, just very validating, and motivating, to kind of see the reactions. To give you some context on like where the events are, so far this year we had an event in Florida, 2 events in Mexico, one in Mexico City, one in Playa del Carmen. We just had we had an event in Dubai in April, and then the most recent one in Austin. Our next 2 events are in the US as well, one of them at PTC Nashville. And then the rest of the year, we're like all over the place in Asia and the Middle East.
I'm curious to hear a little bit about like the CT side of things, the crypto Twitter side of things. I know you guys
Yeah.
have had a couple of big names there, not like actual fighters, obviously, but you get enough followers on Twitter and you're a fighter apparently these days.
Yes.
What are your guys like ties like there? Do you have plans for like more crypto Twitter fights? Is that something
Absolutely.
you guys have like a good bit of interest in?
Definitely.
Would like to just hear a little bit like about that side of your fan base.
Yeah, so we have this entire like spin-off league called the Influencer Fight Club. The first iteration of it was back in February in Mexico City, and it was headlined by Ben Armstrong, BitBoy, fighting the lead dev of Harry Potter, Obama, Sonic Taninu, Taker Bitcoin, and it went super viral. And we're like, holy shit, this like really worked. And I think there's good reasons behind it. Influencer boxing is really big business, but I think it's a bit stale. If you're an amateur fighting with 12-ounce gloves, one, it's very easy to cover up your head, and then 2, it's very hard to knock somebody out if you're a complete amateur. In karate combat, you're fighting with 4-ounce gloves, so getting a little bit less tired and much higher chance of actually like doing some damage and like creating a highlight. And also you have the opportunity to like run around and try and throw your opponent or kick them. And so I think it's just a better rule set for influencer fighting. And yeah, we have huge interest in it. We've got IFC 3 coming up at BTC Nashville, IFC 4 coming up at Token 2049 Singapore. And yeah, we want to keep it going. And the demand from CT and elsewhere is pretty outstanding. I do think, over time we'll integrate more and more mainstream kind of influencers, founders, notorious individuals into the fights. But we bet the entire league on crypto. So it sort of made sense to launch within crypto. It's also sort of an easier place to source fighters that people care about. Crypto is such a close-knit, terminally online community. And so if you bring some of those people into the fights, like the whole crypto world tunes in.
Yeah, I think that's probably some of the funniest. I think like this is non-crypto related, but I think like the guy from Fire Festival, like
Yes.
that clip is just absolutely hilarious as well. Could you describe some of like the hosts? I know there are a lot of people that are,
Yes.
ex-UFC fighters, Mike Malak from
Yep.
just general media influencing. Can you explain kind of who's involved in karate?
Yes, sure. So like our announcer booth, number one, Boss Rutan, he is the chairman of the league. He actually has done every single event except for this last one because he was filming a movie with The Rock. But he'll be back next event because I think filming wraps up before our next event. Then we've got George St. Pierre, arguably the greatest fighter of all time. He does like 1 out of 2 of our events. He's a huge fan and a huge asset to the league. A great guy. And then we've got Mike Malak, co-host of Logan Paul and Jake Paul's Impulsive podcast. And for the last 6 months or so, he's been doing every single one of our events, which he's going to continue doing. And then we've got a number of other kind of ex-fighters who have like periodically step into the booth. Lyoto Machida has probably done 4 or 5 events. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson has done probably 4 or 5 events, and I think he's scheduled to come at one of the next 2. The talent around it is also pretty entertaining. I don't know if you guys saw the Austin event, but Gabriel Haynes actually did like the announcing, like the Bruce Buffer role, which he did a fantastic job at. And I expect him to continue doing that. We got a guy named Robin Black, ex-fighter, ex-musician, really colorful guy, who does like the fight commentary. Dean Thomas, like really high-level guy at the UFC who does like the fighter interviews. And then there's always kind of tons of celebrities hanging out that we interview.
Yeah. So who kind of manages all of that? I mean, I'm assuming it's not like the DAO specifically.
No, yeah. So when we not day to day at least, when we before, or sorry, I guess concurrently with selling the league to the foundation, all the current employees of Karate Combat resigned and went out and formed supplier entities around the world, like production companies in different places where we need licenses, marketing companies, fight ops, and these different suppliers, many of whom were ex-employees of Karate Combat, managed the day-to-day, stuff like that.
Interesting. And sorry, one sec. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said earlier about the rule set when we were talking more about like influencers. Like you mentioned how some of the rules lend themselves to more entertaining fighting for amateurs. Lighter gloves, obviously the structure of the ring. Are there any like other rules that you think would be interesting to implement to make for more entertaining fights? Obviously, you guys have had like the 9 or 10 ones that have passed by governance, but is there anything else like you specifically would be interested to see?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I'm really the crypto person. I think we are open to, and kind of the president league who runs the fight department has been talking about this. We're definitely open to hosting like really big influencer fights on like a pure kind of like Karate Combat without the kicking rule set. I think to get some of the biggest influencers in the world might be a little bit tricky to get them to sign up for getting kicked in the head. I don't necessarily think that itself makes it more entertaining, but 90% of these fights is like who's fighting. So if we can draw in really big stars to fight in Karate Combat, we're willing to hold fights with like slightly modified rule sets. I'm sure that like President Awesome has like a whole list of rules that he wants to change. But I think they're mostly tweaks, like nothing super, super major. We've made a ton of rule changes in the last year. I'd have to check with him actually.
Yeah, I think so as the like crypto person, you probably witnessed all of the crypto specific things that are happening around, I mean, meme coins,
Sure.
social fi stuff. There's a lot of elements that I feel like could be baked into the kind of Karate Combat thing. I could see like people, I mean, I think I saw like a meme coin ad on in the
Oh
actual
yeah.
kit. I mean, there's fighters that could have social tokens, or there could be like actual degenerate style gambling involved
Yeah.
in the application. Where do
Definitely.
you kind of see the positioning shifting in terms of the crypto related stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so we have a huge product roadmap within our apps that we're planning to build. One of the things that we've talked about publicly is we built the games off of Snapshot. So it's it's gas free and instant to play. You only have to spend some gas to claim your winnings. But on the flip side, it has some like real barriers to customer acquisition and marketing because you need to pick a snapshot block. And so you need to onboard people before the snapshot block and they can only play after the snapshot block. So the, kind of public plan is that plan to transition the game to more of like a staking model where you can just like buy karate, lock it through the date of the event or stake it through the date of the event and play at any time. That also like allows us to evolve the tokenomics so that people who have locked up their tokens for longer can get like a bigger share of the reward pool. We have lots and lots of ideas about kind of tweaks to the game, like for instance like things that look like parlays, ways where you can sort of like play against your friends for a bigger pot, kind of like pool all your up on the gaming rewards and like play against 10 friends and the person who's on top can take home the whole pot. But we also like have like really permissive ethos and we're hoping that at some point like people start to build things on top of karate combat, what we've built. You mentioned fighter tokens. Karate combat's the only sport in the world where fighters or athletes of any kind have real on-chain earnings. I think the lack of on-chain earnings is one of the biggest barriers to like create athlete tokens. They're just not that, they're either like a pure meme mostly, or you're trying to jump through a lot of hoops to have any sort of like real value tied to it. But if an athlete actually has on-chain earnings, it could be securitized. It's probably not something that we would do ourselves, but it's totally possible to like securitize the 10% that the fighters are taking home. I could definitely see someone building some sort of like, yearn for karate combats up on the gaming, like some sort of vault that's making all the picks for you. One feature that is done, like, within days, but unreleased is we built an entire affiliate model off of vote delegation. If you talk to like sort of like not competing, but similar products, a lot of their user growth has been through affiliate programs. You can't really have a traditional affiliate program with up on the gaming because it's a free product. But we came up with this very novel affiliate program built off vote delegation. So launching before the next event, karate token holders will be able to delegate their votes to another player and let them make their picks for them. And the person who's making the picks, the delegate, will take home 20% of the rewards. And the idea is you can get like super fans and KOLs and like gambling experts to run around and say like, go get the karate token and delegate it to me and I'll make all the picks for you. And that function itself is pretty extensible too. So yeah, I think there's a whole suite of things. I mean, one of the other things I'm super excited about, in addition to our own spin-off IPs, we have another number of other sports sort of approaching us to license our tech stack, and we're pretty far down the road with like building coming up with like a really crypto native way to make that happen. And for us, there would be massive benefits to the adoption of up-only gaming throughout the broader sports world. We're on a little bit of an island right now, which is good and bad. I mean, there's just nothing else that looks like it. But if other sports started adopting it, you could imagine like a real category developing. You could imagine like these other sports onboarding their own fan bases and really accelerating what's happening with us. It'd be awesome if people could play up only gaming more than once a month. We might get to 2 events a month in a couple of years, but we're not going to get to 20, right? So hopefully we can help onboard a bunch of other sports with what we built.
Yeah, that's sick. There's a lot of like parallels and the different things you just touch based on between like the usual like DeFi stuff of trying to supplement or replace or improve whatever word you want to use with traditional finance, but like on the sports side, like
Yeah.
one thing being different products built on top to like help just have a better user experience or more like flexibility in what a user can do, but also like the idea of like Rails almost sort
Yeah.
of needing to have more access to the rest of the industry in order to really do like everything that you want to do. It's the same thing with finance. Like we don't have great ramps or rails to and from crypto in the same way that karate is just limited to the fighting league that you guys have now. Whereas if you can expand it further, it can do so many more things.
Yep.
To some of like the ideas you spoke to and with like the urine vaults or different things like supplement predictions markets, is there any like products out there right now that you think might like be in a good spot to either like partner with or like build something they're building already but in relation to karate?
There definitely are. I'm not sure if I'm 100%. I mean, one thing is very early on we announced like a super permissive IP license in a couple categories, namely NFTs and video games, allowing anybody that wants to build their own NFT sets or video games on top of Karate Combat's IP. And we've had a number of projects kind of building on that. So that's already happening. We haven't really yet. We've seen like people poking around at like our APIs and stuff to try and think about doing it. And obviously, we talked to tons of like traditional gambling partners who are, considering sponsoring the league and getting integrated in different ways. But nobody
Are,
who's like
are there currently
imminently.
any traditional gambling venues
Oh yeah.
open
Yeah,
for?
you can
Yeah.
bet on Karate Combat and like a ton of different like offshore gambling places. Like when we have events in Vegas, you can bet on them at the casinos in Vegas, and um, yeah,
And this is all built where the token lives on ETH or Hedera?
both. Yeah, it's issued natively on
Okay.
both chains.
Okay. And then for running ads on the mat, how does that process work?
Yeah, it's you know bespoke
No
negotiation
token involvement.
with a sponsor team. I think we did set up a prize for the number one player at each event to give them an opportunity to either be interviewed, get something on the mat or in the virtual background. We've had tons of reverse inquiry from like the crypto world on sponsorships, which is really encouraging. But we haven't, lots of people have proposed that we have some sort of like piece of sponsorship inventory that we like auction off every month. But we got a lot of other stuff to do too, so it's tricky.
Yeah, I'm sure the sponsor space definitely has to be pretty complex and nuanced given like just all the different outlets and options there are.
Yeah, it's pretty bespoke and a lot of delivery requirements and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. We're coming up on time here. I think now is probably a good time to start to wrap up. Want to thank you again for taking the time to come on and chat with us. Before we end it off here, I just wanted to give you a second in case there's like anything that we might have missed out that you want to throw out to our audience, any sort of calls to action, anything at all you might want to share. Feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, easiest thing, go on iOS or Android App Store, download the Karate Combat Vote Live app. You'll get some free tokens, and you'll get a notification that when it's time to play. We've got an event coming up in less than 4 weeks at Universal Studios Orlando on June 28th. That's KC47, and then KC48 at BTC Nashville on July 25th, and that one includes IFC3, our third installment of our crypto influencer fight club.
Good stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah, definitely gonna be checking that out. thanks again, man. This was great.
pleasure.
That was Exit Liquidity episode 76. Thank you for joining us, everyone.